LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. The show business phrase, back to one, is what the first assistant director hollers out to the actors and extras after you filmed a scene. It means go back to your original location at the beginning of the scene because we're going to do it again. Okay, so that's easy. Sometimes. In some scenes, you never move, so back to one means starting your lines all over again during the next take. Or back to one can mean you spit out that barely chewed bite of hamburger you just took for a TV commercial and grab a brand new pristine burger. In those cases, the prop department will have given you a little bucket just off camera for that dirty deed. It's quite disgusting, trust me. And by the time they finally get the shot they want, after 20 takes, that little bucket looks like the remnants of a bulimia convention. Then there are the back to ones that are more complicated. Way more complicated. I shot a commercial for Hyundai where I was the husband with my pretend wife and pretend children, and I was driving us down a city street populated with pedestrians and people driving. Steamrollers. I kid you not. They shut down 5 blocks of beautiful downtown Burbank, had a half dozen people driving steamrollers, and dozens of extras playing happy townspeople seemingly unaware that steamrollers were driving down their street. Only my pretend wife and I could see the steamrollers. When they called out, "Action!" I started driving. The steamrollers started going. All the people started walking. And just in front of the SUV I was driving, there was a camera mounted on a truck that I had to stay 3 feet behind. I drove a half block and then had to stop on a dime without hitting the camera truck. Oh, and act with my pretend wife like we were in some kind of Twilight Zone episode. It didn't help that the woman playing my wife was a total diva. I didn't care for her much, and I felt vindicated when the poor kids in the back seat playing our children told me, "We hate her." With so many moving parts, you can imagine the myriad of things that could go wrong. And did. The steamrollers were too early. I was looking down at the ground in abject horror instead of at my wretched wife. Or I stopped the car too soon or too late. "Back to one," the assistant would yell, and we'd back up, we'd reset. My wife would get her lipstick touched up again. This went on for a good half a day, and it truly was one of the most nerve-wracking gigs that I remember. But I hit my mark enough times, and they got the shots they wanted. It was a cool TV commercial, and I accrued a pension credit for it. Thank you very much. A lot of show business terms have inched their way into my daily vernacular. I suppose if I was a sports person, I would be using knock it out of the park, cross the goal line, punt, or next man up regularly. Though I do admit to using the sports phrase, take one for the team, but that's usually insinuating something very naughty. I still call halftime at sports events intermissions. It's just so much more civilized. Intermission is where one relieves oneself and checks one's hair, stretches one's legs, or grabs a smart cocktail. Halftime, on the other hand, is where you go stand in hideous lines to get a 3,000-calorie, fat and cholesterol-filled Dodger dog and a 600-calorie beer the size of a big gulp. God forbid you have to relieve yourself, because you have to pee in a huge stainless steel trough with a bunch of yahoos who are pretending not to check out everybody's junk. But they are. When you go up for show business jobs, you audition. I call all job interviews, show business or otherwise, auditions. I once had an audition at a major studio for an IT gig. The job would have been a 3-minute commute from my house, and I was thinking this might be a good match. The woman with whom I interviewed had energy. Okay, like frantic, I've had 25 frappuccinos and cocaine energy. She told me she was a certified scrum master, and I nodded my head and said, "Oh, that's nice," not having a clue what a scrum master was. It sounded like some kind of a baking term or something you'd take penicillin for after an unfortunate drunken evening with a stranger. Lucky for me, she had to go take a call, and I looked it up on my phone. In short, A Scrum Master helps to facilitate Scrum to the larger team by ensuring the Scrum framework is followed. She is committed to the Scrum values and practices, but should also remain flexible. Whatever the hell that means, but it's on their website, kids. When she returned, she told me that every morning she gathers with all the staff. You stand in a circle, enthusiastically say what you are working on, and then do some kind of hollering kumbaya Scrum exercise. It sounded like a PBS Susie Orman seminar without the pledge breaks. What did this have to do with building SharePoint websites? I didn't know what to say except, do you get coffee first? If they're interested in you after an audition, you will usually receive a callback. Alas, Lady Scrum Master Frappuccino didn't call me back or book me on that job. I was kind of bummed because I would have really liked to have had a 3-minute commute, but the thought of a daily Scrum meeting with this loon was horrifying. It kind of worked out in the end because 6 months later, that studio had a slew of unsuccessful movies and sacked 1,800 workers right before Christmas. No doubt I would have been one of them as new man on the Scrum totem pole. So I kind of dodged that ball, so to speak. Hey, I just used a sports term. Score! And I used another one. Yay me. After my last podcast, my 41st, I had this urge to go back and re-listen to all my podcasts, starting at the beginning. I do keep a podcast cheat sheet of things I've discussed, so I don't repeat myself, but I don't know. I wanted to actually listen to them. I have them all on a playlist in iTunes, and those 41 podcasts total 8 hours of material. I made notes if there were phrases or topics I felt I had overused. Yes, there are, and no, I'm not going to mention them here because then I'd have to note that I used them again. Listening to all these podcasts proved to be a really interesting exercise. I was listening to my third podcast, 7 Year Bitch, in which I talk about this phenomenon I seem to have every 7 years that hits me and proves to be a kind of life reset. The episode mentioned that 2014 was one of those years. I stopped. Wait, 2014 plus 7. Oh my God. 2021. This year. I'm in one. And I hadn't even thought about this year being one. And if you listen to my 40th podcast, Guacamole for Breakfast, you'll know. It was a cathartic walk and kind of a back to one moment. In another episode, I talk about this document I created called The Timeline of Tony. It's a timeline of major events in my life. Recently, I was cleaning out the garage and found a box of mementos I had brought back from my mom's house in Iowa after she threatened to charge me storage fees if I didn't take it home. In this box, I found a little red 3-ring binder that I thought, well, sure, this is small. This will take no time to scan. Well, that little red binder turned out to be my appointment calendar from December 1984 to August 1986, the day I arrived in California. In those pages, I got to see the steps and events that led up to my deciding to move to LA. I took a whole weekend, adding pertinent and sometimes sordid details to the timeline of Tony from that book. It was like watching a movie of my life, and it was kind of cool. It seemed ironic that I was revisiting this exactly 35 years from when I had arrived in Los Angeles, full of energy, dreams of the future, and scared but excited about what was to come. It was an interesting reminder of what I came out here to do. 2021, 7-year bitch, be gone already. Back to one. Another big showbiz job I shot in a car was at the Warner Brothers Ranch, which is a famous backlot. In this TV commercial, I was an Allstate insurance adjuster who had some kind of a weird ability to see all these horrible things that can happen, kind of like Christopher Walken in The Dead Zone. It was a great 3-day shoot, and in this one scene, I was again driving down a quaint suburban street and see a house. But then my vision kicks in, and flames explode out of the upstairs windows, and a woman comes frantically running out of the front door. That was a huge shot to set up. The explosion, the flames, the stunt woman me driving the car. Thankfully, I didn't have to drive this time. And best of all, I had no L'Oreal lipstick diva wife with me. I was in what's called a picture car. It's a car that is on a trailer being pulled. Oh, it's great. All you have to do is pretend to drive and react to the scene. I was like Jane Hathaway during the Beverly Hillbillies opening credits. Besides all the cool effects of exploding this house, which was also set on fire in the film Lethal Weapon, by the way, the absolute greatest thing for me was 2 doors down from the burning house was the house used as Major Nelson's house in I Dream of Jeannie. And just down the road from that was the house used as Samantha Stevens' house in Bewitched. And right next door, the Partridge Family house. This kid from Iowa really felt like he had made it. They'd holler, "Cut, back to 1." I'd sit there as they drove the trailer, carrying the car back to 1, almost peeing my pants every time. "Hey, Mrs. Partridge, is adorable David at home?" "Samantha, where's Uncle Arthur and Aunt Clara?" "Jeannie, Major Healy is looking for you." Whether it's reliving the sordid movie of your life, reading your old journal, or listening to your 4 years' worth of podcasts, or driving by your childhood TV show homes in a picture car, every once in a while, we can all use a little back to 1 reset to remind us who we really are.
LOL take 2. LOL take 2. LOL take 2.